Revolt against who and why? Copyrighted July 31st, 2015, Simi Valley, California, 93063, USA, all rights reserved. By U.S.A. PhD Company. The U.S.A., those who have gained control by hook or crook, frankly, by the gun, assassinations, murder, eliminating witnesses, cover-ups, genocide. I repeat with emphasis, genocide, forced grand theft, etc. These are Hooverists. The situation of the U.S. is that we have an illegal president. That's the fact. Not born in the USA. So you can imagine the deals that fellow has made. God, yeah, he can maybe be in the U.S., but by law cannot be the president. He's not born in the United States. So the system, 52% plus, say that the system has corroded and is corrupt from the top on down. Now, my motto, and especially of late, is to emphasize an august body, an international cultural people are an august body that don't practice and refuse that Hooverists and their criminally insane gyrations, and they do something and then they get in a circle from the top, they get in a circle and they decide to do something and they appropriate the money or get the money, and then they push that on down until it gets to the street, and then from the street it comes back up to them, and they put on a facade that they're supposed to be so good. They're phonies. They're corrupt from the top on down. That's a revolting situation. The situation of the U.S. is that it's a revolting situation by those who have grabbed control, as I've specified, violating the laws of God and man, Constitution, Bill of Rights, Civil Rights. Yeah. And they laugh and they say, yeah, but we get paid to hit you, and that's what we want. And what you can do about it? Well, they go with quantity. They figure, well, up to make 200 plus agents in one operation to frame you, force you into one of two, which they can say is illegal, or they can frame you and make you anything they want and say you are. Well, I've decided that I'm going to hit them with quantity in order to obtain justice, honors, and financial compensation for my world-class achievements in science and inventions. Like what? The Xerox, X-E-R-O-X, I'm from Rochester, New York. It's where he's in Code Experimental Development Lab. Used to use the old mimeograph machine. It would malfunction, too much ink. You had to try to grind it at even rate. And they would complain that I was getting the ink into their parts per million in their vats of in development equipment. And I said, well, there's got to be a better way. Photoelectron, that have a photoelectric copier And that's how I worked with it and drew it. And the first one came out, the size, shape, everything the way I had diagrammed. And where to start it? Well, I used to walk by Haloid, which was it was part of or on adjacent to Eastman Kodak. And I used to walk by there and I said, well, I'll look in there. And I said, Haloid, they're trying to do it through really a chemical of heat process, by photoelectron, a carbon arc flash, and the difference of potential. The electrolytic would be air, which is free. But I, of course, went to a patent office and talked to a patent man about my photoelectric copier, and he says, wow, this is really good. This is, look, I'll put it up here in the top drawer. This is top drawer. I said, well, you get the patent. He says, well, we can't get it here in Sacramento. At the time I was in Sacramento, I had left Rochester and gone west. And he said, the only office is in Washington. When he said that, oh, gee, that's Hoover's hometown. He owns the town. He got all that power. So they can move fast and control the office. So it went as Haloid Xerox, like I said, and Haloid. And they came back. I looked in there, it was empty. They had gone bankrupt, gone to Chicago. They said, oh, Haloid has now got a new process, and they'll get the patent. So I started to get signs to parade that I invented the Xerox, X-E-R-O-X. And they started Haloid Xerox little development shops. And I said, see, and mine is just Xerox now. There, Hoover took with his power, and they dropped the Haloid, and it was Xerox photocopier. Absolute true fact. Well, they work with the English intelligence, and the English are notorious for frauds and so forth. Like the Loch Ness Monster. The Loch Ness Monster, the fella was on TV twice in one night, and they showed how, and he showed how he made this equipment and then sent it on the lake to a friend of his, and then he filmed it, and it came out in that semi-dark, the silhouette, like a monster sea serpent, and it was as a practical joke. They showed it once the next day, but I haven't seen it since. That's the true facts. That they say they're looking for the Loch Ness Monster. They're just the best way of making money. So it was Haloid Xerox in the U.S. and Rank Xerox in England for the money. It's blood money. Hoover, genocide, they murdered my brother. And I says, hey, I don't care about Xerox or money or my laser beam. Say, hey, that man talks a little angry, eh? Yeah, absolutely. Latification of electromagnetic radiation. I did the original work of the laser science. And I did it immediately after the Xerox. And I said, well, I know it's a futuristic multi-purpose coherent beam. Xerox, I make $10 million the first year. Move up to $100 million by second year. But I didn't care about anything inside. Just don't murder my brother. Well, okay. So they took my science and invention and then still murdered my brother. That was Hoover. He said, yeah, what's ours is ours, what's yours is ours. And he got the power to keep me anonymous and cover up. And say legally, especially through a patent office, whatever, they're the legal owners. They did it, and they're legal owners by what they put out in the public and the literature. These are the true facts. I'm not coming to you as expose editor. I'm coming to you as Doxy PhD company, world-class science and inventions. Obtain the omega step in science, particularly in physics, and most precisely in advanced concepts in theoretical mathematical physics. Like what? Well, in order to work in science and to get away from Hoover, he didn't like Einstein. Einstein didn't work on the A development, and that's where I overnight was at the top. I called for a secret meeting because I was sure, after reviewing atomic fission and Enrico Fermi's work, that I could represent it, especially with a diagram, and emphasize that there are two fusions as you have the chain reaction. So this is what happens on the sun. You have fission with the heat, you get fusion, and then you get the fission, fusion cycle on the surface of the sun. Tremendous solar flares prove fusion. And so I did it from the viewpoint like I had the equipment and went through both as analytic presentation with the basis as it's put forward in chemical equivalence, but I went from the atomic weight to add and show a proof, 3 pages, and I got to work as an engineering tech at the University of Rochester, and from there they had the only atom smasher anywhere in the area, and I could see where it was. It was in a fenced area, and if I recall, it is advanced physics department, cyclotron building, and everybody had to sign in and out. Whoever was allowed to go in was sign in and out. And that time we were in a rush to get something done, so we worked Saturdays. And I noticed on Saturdays, the only ones that practically walked in there were the professors who were working with the cyclotron and the atom smasher. So I called the FBI and said, I think I have a powerful, more even powerful, maybe 100 times more powerful than atomic fission. And the man, asked me who I was and so forth, and I explained a little. He says, well, I'm not a scientist. He says, we're not scientists here. He says, but I said, well, I suggest we have a secret meeting at the University of Rochester on a Saturday, and I explained why, and whoever would have to sign in and out, and that's what they agreed to, and that's what was done. Now, at first, they kind of kept saying, well, possibly, on page 1, I essentially was reproducing fission. Then on page 2, I went into more of analytic proof, and they said, well, this appears it could be valid. And on page 3, I did like I had performed the experiments and the proof of fission fusion. And they said, yeah, it's valid. And we began to then talk about building an H-bomb, hydrogen fusion. The true facts. And then I said, well, I had the good fortune of being taught military science by a colonel from West Point. And, you know, I said, I know I'm a young man, but he said, you're training to be an officer. When you're an officer, you make your best decision and you stick by it, and that's what you do. And I said, that's what I'm doing in this presentation. And I said that this now, in my opinion, rules out using radiant energy to kill, because it's so powerful. Wipe out a whole city with just one bomb. And I said, and who gets this first? Well, would even dominate, if it's not us, would even dominate the A-bomb we have. And we were discussing, and they said, well, what do you think? We figure, you know, such a nation in 25 years. I was going to say 5. When he was 25, I said, well, probably 15. They did it in 2. You understand? They got atomic fission in 2, and then, of course, went from the atomic fission to duplicating the H-bomb. Now, these are the true facts. So, what did I suggest? And I said, well, I made 4 years high school and 3 at physics and math, and I thought of a future, you know, as a leader. And it appears to me as though this atomic bombs and H-bombs absolutely cannot be used against humanity. So we have to get then diplomacy. We have to get diplomacy or diplomats to discuss our differences. And that's the policy the U.S. adopted and went forward and still does. You understand? What I've done and therefore who I really am. But Hoover did not want an Italian descent man to be that powerful and rich because because Hoover was immoral. In fact, anyway, he's called him a queer back in them days. And so I said, hey, we got to replace Hoover. He's a queer. I didn't realize that what you said would go back to him. So I was at the top, tremendous paradox. I was at absolute top and at the bottom because anybody who tried to replace Hoover, I found out, died violently. Or certainly had a miserable life. And so that's the position I was in without knowing it, as a super patriot. So, as Doc C PhD company, there's that. And what could I mention that now I push upward and forward, upward and forward? There is cultural people on this planet, and we form an august body of cultural society that this is who we really are. And that's what I would prefer to discuss and mention. Like what? Well, I've studied all the scientists, and I analyzed in the discipline of science that the number one of all time through history, of course, is fire to heat and process food, and you can then have food and it wouldn't spoil in the ancient times. And then you came to where you get uh, the fact of bacteria, and you take and sterilize food, you sterilize your instruments, and the great Louis Pasteur, pasteurization, tremendously important. The more and more people in the world, and you have to have pasteurization. So I have Louis Pasteur as one of the top. And then the electric light bulb, light up the world. That has been a tremendous plus. The electric light bulb by Thomas Edison. And then from that, what? Lightification of electromagnetic radiation. The laser futuristic coherent bearing. That laser futuristic multi-purpose coherent beam is my original laser science and invention, and gave it the name. Absolutely. So if that right now, the laser beam is #1 in the world, has been for at least 20 years, then who am I that I demand my constitutional justice, honors, and financial compensation that was forcibly taken from me? And you, because I would talk to certain people, and I had the right to designate who then could work with me and benefit. Isn't that true? So it's my constitutional rights and my justice, honors, and financial compensation, and yours. Those who say, yeah, it's the true facts, and I would, of course, work with that with Doc C, PhD company, and that's where I'm at. Now, what we have to do then is to, they hit me with quantity. All right, so we're Hooverists, and they openly are Hooverists. And what can I do about it? And they're going to do me in, which they have done for years, hit me. Horrible crimes and practice of genocide. Narrowly escaped death by increments of time, or the risk at least 6 times. And so these are the true facts, and I come to you as Doc C, PhD company, saying that we must obtain justice, honors, and financial compensation, of course. And to all of us in the august body, I say to all of those who agree and any who help, of course, I thank you.